Welcome to the Community Talk, where we connect, share stories, and dive into the latest freelancing buzz together. Welcome everyone to another Community Talk. I'm excited to introduce our special guest today, Sang, who is a highly accomplished freelancer designer and illustrator. Sang, welcome.
Thank you. As Vladimir said, I've been doing freelance for quite a while, but I'm new to Upwork, so I'm also here for advice as you hear my stories. But I have been doing freelance outside of Upwork for quite a few years, more in-person work and such. So yeah, but I do have some observations about Upwork with things that worked for me and what didn't. So I'll share that a little later.
Okay, thank you. Could you start by sharing a bit about yourself, like where you're originally from, how you got into the business that you are in currently, and yeah, we'll start from there.
Sure. So you can just call me Sang, S-A-N-G, very easy to pronounce. I'm originally from South Korea. I grew up there actually, and I moved to the US when I was in ninth grade. And then I went on to university and decided to major in chemistry. Big mistake. I did it for a year and a half and dropped out because I was no good. And I dropped out to go study fashion in New York, which like millions of other people in New York. And luckily, I got into a very good school, majored in fashion with the intent of getting into costumes. That was my main interest, either in film or theater. It didn't matter, but I wanted to get into costumes, and I thought fashion design would be a good segue into that. So during school, I got a freelance opportunity to work for an event entertainment company as a costume assistant. And so I was like, I don't know what this job is, but I'll start. So I started and ended up loving this job. It actually became, I think, the closest thing to my dream job. I didn't know that kind of event entertainment industry existed, which is in that industry, you get to experiment a little more. For example, for a film, you might have to make a costume that fits the movie and maybe not something too crazy because that would take the audience out of the movie. But with events, they might ask for, oh, we want giant alien head costumes at this event, and I would just make them. So it was more fun for me to experiment with a lot of different designs and concepts and get very creative. So I ended up doing that for a little while. And then after living in New York for almost 10 years, I just got burnt out after trying to survive for a long time and competing and all of those things. So I ended up moving out of New York, and that's basically my introduction why I got into freelance. I moved out of New York to experience something completely different from New York, very peaceful, somewhere isolated, somewhere kind of beautiful. So I moved out with my husband to Charleston, South Carolina. It's a very peaceful, quiet place, but there's nothing to do there, right? So I was like, okay, maybe for a year I could try this out. After I moved, a month in, the pandemic happened. So I kind of got stuck there for 4 years. So that's where I started getting into freelance and trying to find ways to work. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a great start to your story, but we haven't gotten to the best part yet. I just wanted to reiterate for everyone who will be watching the recording later on our YouTube channel to check the description and go to your Upwork profile and check your Upwork portfolio as well as your online portfolio, and look at the different designs and the type of service you're offering. I think this is a very specific niche service, and I'm really interested into kind of uncovering how you actually found such a niche specialized service even within the creative industry,
Yeah.
and was able to make it work. Like there
Yeah.
are clients, you are finding clients, you are finding success on Upwork, you are top rated.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. So I would say I was very lucky to have found this industry to begin with, event entertainment industry. And how I got into that, I remember, I'm majoring in fashion design at college, but I am very ambitious about going into costumes, and I didn't know how. So I interned at a theater, I worked at a set design agency. I did all of these different kinds of jobs to figure out a way to get in there. And in the meantime, I also just what do you call it? Cold emailed people. I had a list, I looked for a list of production companies in New York. I mean, there are so many. So I started emailing people to see if they needed a costume person, right? And I never really heard back from too many people except this event entertainment company, which was a fairly small company run by a married couple. It was a very small company, but and when they said event entertainment, I just had no idea what that was. So when I went, it turns out event entertainment means, New York has a lot of rich people. So these rich clients uh, throw parties. They have private parties. Maybe it's a company gala or a company holiday party, but it's very extravagant. And a lot of times in those places, they want entertainment. So our company provided the entertainment, for example, like a live band or dancers who perform a choreographed number, like a Gatsby flapper number. And I would be the person who designed and dressed the costumes on those talents. So that was a very niche industry to begin with that I kind of ran into by luck. So that's where I started. And with freelance, I had a very hard time finding clients in this niche. So where I started was, okay, I'm going to try to find more clients, meaning I'm going to work with more everyday people instead of an event company or someone who, like a theater. I'm going to try to work with more regular people. And I found a handful of people. Uh, I never thought there would be a need, but there were people who were looking to get a very specific costume made that wasn't really sold anywhere, that they couldn't find, but they needed for a very specific event, whether it was Halloween. There was a unique one on Upwork that was for a client who was also a dad, who had just written a children's book. So he had a caterpillar character in his book, and he was going to schools to read the book to, school students, uh, reading the book himself, but he wanted to dress as the caterpillar, you know, character. So I was like, that's a very weird request, but very fun. So I did that one. That was one of my favorite projects, I would say. So there's definitely a need, but I did come across a lot of problems on Upwork when it comes to costuming or costume projects because there's just not enough projects. So a lot of times I will find projects outside of Upwork because my skills are so niche. And recently I've been using a different entertainment platform for costume jobs. And with Upwork, I've been shifting focus a little more into illustration projects, which I've been seeing a little more success. So that's all recent development, but that's what I've been doing to find those weird niche projects when it comes to costumes.
okay, thank you for sharing
Hmm.
that information. I would just like to try and share my screen real quick.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure if everybody can see.
Oh my goodness. Vladimir, I haven't looked at my profile in a while, so great. Now I'm looking at it.
Yeah. So just for everyone's attention, this is one of the samples, one of the projects that Sang completed. And just to clarify, it's not just costume design, it's also costume creation.
That's right.
So yeah, that's really interesting. I would say this is my first case that someone's actually creating something real, something
Uh,
live in addition to the services and like designs they are kind of creating and selling online.
mhm.
So yeah, this is really nice. Uh, I have a question.
Yeah.
Since you are in the creative industry and looking at your online portfolio, I would say that you have a specific style, at least based on the photos I've reviewed
Hmm.
there. So, do you ever have a hard time maintaining your artistic integrity and unique style when you're kind of reviewing different client requests? Are you ever in a position to decline an offer?
That's that's a great question. I have definitely declined offers. Even when I'm not getting enough jobs, I will decline an offer if, but I think, I guess, I'm terrible at many things, but my strengths are customized styles, even though I do have a very unique style of my own. I do love a challenge. If someone challenges me to create something that is totally outside of my comfort zone, I'm a bit of a risk taker and I enjoy doing new projects. So I will always say yes and get into trouble. Like I will always make a mistake or something, but I will try something new. But I have said no to projects that I feel like um, it's something that I can't achieve with my abilities. I have said no to those. Or if someone's paying, actually, I am always willing to work with more. That's usually my goal, I think, with Upwork, even with illustration. I'm trying to work with clients that are more everyday people like me who want something good and creative in their hands, whether it's costumes or children's book. So I'm always willing more to work with those clients rather than big clients. So yeah, if someone's giving me a slightly lower budget, but it's something very ambitious, I'm always trying to meet them in the middle, you know? I'm trying to give them a realistic expectation and trying to work with them. But if it's very unrealistic when it comes to budget on a project, I will say no, because sewing, making things from scratch takes a very long time. Even if I do it quickly, it would take 2 weeks and then plus delivery time. So, and later on, I came across many other problems and variables that are outside of my control. For example, actually, one time a costume got lost in the mail. Uh-huh. So after going through those weird, issues that I never expected to happen, I am a little more cautious about taking costume projects. So I've kind of slowed down that line of projects a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. When it comes to clients, you have collaborated with really well-known brands. Is that the case now on Upwork, or was that the case when you were based in New York?
Um, Actually, all those big clients are outside of Upwork, unfortunately. I haven't really, again, I think who I target is a little different on Upwork. I tend to work with smaller clients because I know I can get those jobs a little quicker and I have a better success rate with those smaller scale jobs. But with those bigger clients, actually, I did get those clients as a freelancer, but outside of Upwork. And it was through connections I had that I built from New York. So I do think it has a lot to do with the geography and where I lived, because New York had so many entertainment people and artists, directors. So those people that I know have sending me projects my way that happens to be for Netflix or for Canon or yeah, for bigger clients. So I've found that with bigger clients, my connections have been more effective in getting those projects.
One of the problems that I often hear from freelancers, yeah, especially in the design category, is the problem of one-off projects. So it's not often that you get repeat clients in the design category. What's your experience like?
That's true. I think that's true on Upwork. Again, I'm not very as experienced as everybody else on Upwork, so they probably have better advice or experience to tell than I do. But again, with more continuous work, I've gotten through real people connections that I have from New York that I've worked with before. I've gotten a lot of continuous different projects through my connections. But with Upwork, um, I haven't had that much of that kind of experience. As you said, it's very one-off kind of project. But I am with my illustration work, I am kind of changing my direction into children's book illustrations because in that genre, I find it easier to build connections with people because I'm reading their creative work, which is oftentimes I choose more personal projects. Maybe the characters, maybe you wrote the book for your children, maybe you based your characters off of your parents. So I tend to go for more personal stories so I can uh, kind of, when I read the text and communicate with the clients, it's easier to form that bond and continue on the project. And a lot of times the clients will say, "Oh my gosh, I would love to work with you on my next book. I have three more ready." I think that's easier to do depending on the category. I haven't found that success in a different category of illustrations, which is why I've veered into children's book illustration, which have been more consistent and regular in that way.
Do you maybe have a favorite project that you'd like to share with us?
Favorite project. Let's see. Uh, Actually, the project I'm working on right now, is quite sweet. It's basically what I just mentioned. It's a very short story, but it's a 12-page children's book illustration, children's book, and he based the characters on his parents. And it's like teddy bear characters inspired by his parents, and it kind of talks about their cultural background, and it's a very sweet story. And honestly, I never thought I would get into children's books. I was just all around illustrator. So I think projects like this kind of, I feel very good when I'm working on them because it's more personal. And so every project is different, but that is one of my favorites, but I'm sure I'll come across many others in the future.
That's awesome. Just to come back to something that we were speaking about before the call, you mentioned you actually moved out of the New York City and made that shift in your career and starting to set up your small business just a month after the pandemic hit.
Mhm.
Seeing that like 4 years ago, I think. Are you happy where you're at currently with your business, with like the opportunities?
Great question. That's a very deep question. But I am actually very happy. I would say I was quite unhappy during the pandemic, just like everybody else. Uh, but I had a huge regret about leaving New York because I actually thought I met when I was in New York, I lived there all of my 20s. So I always say New York is a great place for people in their 20s and single people. It's a great place to experience a lot of things, you know, adventures, creative opportunities, everything you can find is in New York. But I had a huge regret because I'm a very ambitious person when it comes to creative projects and doing new things. I'm very adventurous. So I felt like I couldn't get everything I got in New York elsewhere. So I think that was the source of my unhappiness for a little while. But after kind of slowly figuring out freelance, I think I feel more balanced. If anything, I feel more stable than I ever did in New York. Maybe it's also getting older too. And, you know, everyone, I think their goals are different, their values are different, or what they want in life. That has also changed a little bit for me, so maybe that's why. But yeah, I think it's always a work in progress with freelance. It's always different every day, but I'm pretty happy where I'm at. Oh,
Oh,
I
yeah.
see there's a little chat question.
Yes, I just wanted to read out
Mhm.
Noor's question, and thanks, Noor, for posting it in chat. So, what are some of the opportunities and challenges of freelancing specific to book illustration niche?
Yes, I have a few things to say about that. So the reason, at first, when as an illustrator, like on my website, you'll see my illustration portfolio. To be honest, it's all over the place because I used to do illustration freelance here and there, and I kind of did it as a hobby. So there was no focus. Um, so when I started applying to Upwork illustration jobs, any kind of illustration jobs, I realized I might get a job, but it might not be a good fit for me because I'm kind of applying without much of a focus. And, you know, with Upwork, I started, you know, going on every day at a certain time and checking the job post. If it's not there, you know, I get off. If I see an opportunity, I apply right away within the first hour or two. You know, I've developed certain habits, but what I noticed with the job postings is that the most job posts that I saw were of children's book illustrations. I think there's a huge boom of self-published writers who are creating children's books out there that need illustrators. So that's where I thought, oh, this is a better market than rather than a general, you know, illustrator job. So that's when I started specializing. So in an opportunity sense, there are a lot of job opportunities for children's book illustrations. Now, on the flip side, there are so many illustrators out there. Very likely, there's going to be hundreds of illustrators who are more talented than you, more experienced than you, and have drawn hundreds of other books already. So I think figuring out your market, um, that's where I only target everyday individuals who are self-publishing a small book. And I never apply to posts that are maybe written by a company or agencies because they're looking for other things. They're looking for what sells and something that fits a certain format of books. And I don't specialize in that. I do plan on applying to an agency at some point, but right now I'm trying to build up my book illustration portfolio. So in that way, finding your target, I think, is once you can find that in the illustration niche, I think can be very helpful. But I do have to say it's a very competitive, but a big market.
Okay. What are your plans for the future? And is your specific niche affected in the same way with the general freelancing trends, like some of the other more populated categories like web design or writing, translation, and such?
Oh, you mean if trends affect such niche categories like mine?
Yeah, if like it sounds like the switch to like to children's books and illustrating children's books is something that you kind of found on your own. You weren't kind
Yeah.
of, you know, pushed
Hmm.
into that direction and way of thinking. So are there any
Mm.
freelancing market movements that are kind of affecting your specific niche?
Mm.
Let's mention AI, for example. Is that a
Yes.
vector?
Ugh, that is the bane of my existence. A just yesterday, a client, communicating with a client. She likes my work, blah, blah, blah. And she, I can see that she's interviewing 8 other people, right? That's fine. I don't mind competition. Like, you really love this book is your baby and you really want to create something special. So you want the right person. I totally get it. But she messaged me with the other freelancers' work, which were AI created. And so I'm just kind of in a place where I'm wondering, but what do you want? Do you want AI style or more hand-drawn, creations? Like, I think, uh, and I do see a lot of children's book illustration posts where even in the description, it says AI use okay. So it's definitely a big trend using AI, but to my eye, I don't necessarily like AI art. I think it's very visibly different from what I tend to like. So I just try to veer away from those clients because our needs are different. So that's definitely affected my niche. Um, I think you also asked when it comes to planning the future in my niche. Um, so outside of Upwork, and I have some other freelance, I do murals, I do all kinds of little regular freelance every month or every other month. Um, and costume, I've decided that I'm going to try to do as when I find the opportunity, I will do in-person costume work maybe 3 or 4 times a year. That's my goal, and I've been kind of meeting that goal. Um, I think in the future, I would like to work on a bigger scale, more long-term costume project that's in person, where I'm working with maybe a film director and, actors, things like that. So kind of growing my project scale, but not necessarily needing to do costume, so many times a year. I just need one big project. That's where my goal's at. But in the meantime, in the daily routine, I love doing illustration. So I think keeping this pace of working on children's book illustration, maybe 2 or 3 a month, because I work fairly quickly. I think keeping up that pace would be my goal for now. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Being
Mhm.
from Korea, were you at least in part inspired, at least as a kid, by those traditional like Korean theater, Korean drawing? I know there's like the whole culture there. Was that part of the inspiration for you personally?
Strangely enough, like I do love Korean traditional paintings, and I have like lots of books about them, and I refer to them a lot as inspiration. But strangely, I grew up in a household where, goodness, my dad loved Hollywood movies. So I just grew up watching a lot of 90s Hollywood films, which is why it says, like, on my website, I'm a 90s cinephile. Because give me a weird 90s film fact, I'll already know what that is. So that's where I think a lot of my influence is, and that's why I wanted to get into costumes actually, because I grew up watching so many movies.
Okay, okay, perfect. Even though you believe you're not experienced on Upwork, it does appear that you are using Upwork in the best possible way. I had just one question. I see you have a number of portfolio items, but it does appear you're currently not using catalog projects. Have you given a thought about try creating a project or two, or you kind of checked that already and decided it's not in line with your...
I don't think I even tried. I think
Okay.
I probably should. That sounds like a great idea. So thank you for the advice. I think I've been focused more on uh I'm really bad with like keeping those like using all the tools available to me, especially on Upwork. And I've been, I think, focused more on like how to build the right proposal for my target clients, which I think I've been getting a little better over time, but I should really utilize that catalog element for sure.
You mentioned you're working on your proposals. Uh, as a sneak peek, do you have any specific approach to drafting your proposals?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have done this if you're a beginner. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and I've applied some of them. Man, some of them I sound like a jerk if I use those tactics. So I tend to customize my profiles in the most genuine way from my perspective as possible, but I also tend to write a lot. So I tend to also summarize as much as possible. If I'm using 10 words, make it six. Yeah, I try to do that. But I will always, try to refer them to them by their name if it's available and say, I see you're looking for a children's book illustrator for your very specific titles with the characters. I refer to their project with as much detail as possible to make sure they know I've read their project. Or I will mention something a little more personal, like, I love that you based your characters off of your parents. I think that's lovely. I will throw in something more personal like that, which I've noticed works better for me. I wouldn't recommend that for Upwork freelancers who are working with bigger clients and more corporate, where more corporate language is used, because I've worked in that setting as well. And right now, my target clients are more personal, everyday people. So that's why I'm personalizing my proposals to be more, a little more authentic and like a more human. Um, it was interesting. Recently, I got a project by, how we say, don't ever work for free. I actually kind of went against that rule. And when I read this text, I thought it was a great story. I thought it was a great story. And, my strength as an illustrator is high quality in a very short amount of time. So I can draw fairly quickly. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes to draw the character that he wrote about. And I'm going to send this character design, just a small doodle, but, clean sketch, and attach it in the proposal. And I got the job right away. So I think, I'm not telling people to go around work for free on Upwork. Don't do that. But I think when you're customizing the proposal, it really depends on the client. But sometimes that little touch of extra customization that feels more personal works for me.
No, that's a great experience to share. Um, let's focus on illustration because I want to do a little bit of deep dive into your experience with some of the Upwork features based on your niche. Looking at your profile, you do have previous experience with fixed price and hourly projects. When it comes to the type of job, do you set them up specifically certain types of projects as fixed price and certain type of projects as hourly, or do you just go with the client's preference?
I think I have a tendency to prefer hourly projects
Okay.
or if it's a fixed amount, I will specifically plan out the milestones. And usually with children's book illustration, this is based on my short experience. I will divide the milestones usually as 4. So the first step would be turn in sketch drafts, or turn in sketch of character design. Usually books involve characters, so you want to set the characters first. And that's usually maybe 20% of the whole fixed price. And then the next step is to finalize the characters. And usually all of this is done within the first 3 or 4 days. I usually set that up. And then the amount for the second step will be a little higher. And then for the third one, it would be sketch draft of all the pages, including the covers and everything. And again, a little more for the amount. And then lastly, the final pages all colored. And that would have the most amount. Usually that's how I break it up, so that client feels like they're not throwing in money from the beginning. And I'm a very communicative person when it comes to clients. I am very good about sending progress photos. I want to make sure, and this is not to keep the client happy. I think it's more about, when I worked in the costume industry, every day was miscommunication. And, no one intends to miscommunicate. It just happens when you don't expect it. So I tend to over communicate. I tend to let them know where I'm at to make sure we're on the same page. So that has been my experience. So I like to work that way with my illustration clients as well. So having milestones like that always helps for me, at least.
Okay. That's a good advice.
Sorry for interrupting that. So, but which works more, better with you and clients, especially you are working more with clients who are not corporates or businesses. You're working more with individuals. So what is usually what works better for you and for clients in terms of hourly versus fixed?
Good question. I guess if I had to pick one, I have to say, when I go into a project, I give them even if I do hourly, I give them already an estimated amount of hours I will be using for the project. I will say it's very likely that I'm only going to spend, like 20 whatever hours for this project. And so I never go over those hours unless, and I do say when I start the contract, this is the amount of hours I've estimated. But if after, after everything is mostly done, if you want a dramatic change in some of the pages or something very different from what we had planned from the beginning, then I do charge a little extra to fix those details in later on. So to me, I don't think I've done a lot more, I think, hourly projects, but I can't say what necessarily works better because I already give them a certain fixed estimated amount. So I don't know if that answers your question. I couldn't say, I think they're equally effective, to be honest, for myself and the clients.
Thanks for Noor for your question. There's another question from Noor saying, have you ever thought of publishing your own illustrated books and hire a freelancer children book writer?
No, That sounds like a great idea. I actually, um, so when that just brings up some story when I started illustrating on Upwork and I was like, I'm going to try to get into children's book illustration. But I had no children's book illustration experience or portfolio for that matter. So I decided to just sit down and create a very small portfolio to send to a client, which ended up working. But all I did was creating 3 drawings: book cover, spread, which means 2 continuous pages, and spot drawings, which is small drawings on a page. Then you kind of give them show them that you understand what's needed in a book. And while I was doing that, I just kind of came up with a random story. I just came up with a story about some witch in a forest, very typical. But I had so much fun writing the story. I was like, oh, maybe I should write my own book. So I did jokingly think about that, but I think my book would be terrible. So maybe I will hire a book writer in the future. I don't know. I didn't think about that much, but that's a great idea.
You mentioned earlier that there will always be, in certain cases, miscommunication, and since it's a creative industry, there's a lot of taste and preference involved. Have you ever had a problem on or off Upwork that you weren't able to resolve with a client?
Yes. I'll give you an example from Upwork. Actually got one project returned. Uh-huh. It was a very complicated design and I think it was pretty well made, but turns out I think it took me 4 weeks or maybe longer, maybe a little more than a month or so. And the client was happy with the photo. I sent her the finished costume. Turns out she had lost a lot of weight, so the costume didn't fit anymore, right? That is outside of my control, right? Now, the next step would be, I even suggested, since we both put in a lot of time into this project, why don't you return it for free and I will adjust it for free and send it back to you. That didn't happen. The client just said, oh, now I don't know how I feel about it anymore. And then I ended up refunding part of the project to her and just receiving back the project. But that is, I wouldn't say it's miscommunication, but maybe it's lack of communication if your sizes change, and maybe if she had let me know, then I would have, fixed the size or something. So that's one example, but I would say outside of Upwork, miscommunication, especially in costumes, happen all the time. And I think it's because I worked in an event industry, which is always last minute. Clients change their mind. Our company, creative team changes their mind. And I had to kind of adapt to whatever situation I was given. So when the work pace is so fast like that every day, miscommunication happens. Maybe they wanted a costume to look like A, but I made it like B because we didn't communicate, but we had to get stuff done because we have other events to, prepare for. So things like that happened all the time. I'm very used to miscommunications.
Okay. Just from this conversation, it really sounds like you're personally immersing yourself into each project. Do you ever experience creative blocks, and how do you work through them?
Creative blocks. I think, yes, I do experience creative blocks when it comes to my personal projects. And I think that's why I love freelance, because, and I now have the freedom, because as a freelancer, you have the freedom to choose your own projects. Not always. Sometimes you have to pay the bills and you'll take whatever project's available. But because I have the choice to pick a project that personally speaks to me, that means a little more. So when I work as a freelancer, I'm really enjoying the project, right? So when I enjoy the project, I think that's when the ideas come. So if I'm having a creative block, I take a project that sounds exciting. And I'm very ADHD kind of person. I like doing everything at once and I get really easily distracted. So I tend to work better when I have a lot of different projects going on where I can jump on this and then work on my personal project, jump on that. So in that way, freelance, I think, is a good inspiration and motivator for me.
Okay, perfect. For all the prospective illustrators and designers that might be watching this recording later, are there any apps or software that you personally prefer that you'd like to share or recommend?
Oh, you mean like platforms?
Yes.
Hmm,
For like creating
any?
your designs and
Okay, yeah.
let's expand the question. How does that project look for you when you get a project? There's like, of course, that mental part of kind of deciding on the design and coming up with everything. But how do you actually put it on paper? Do you first put it on paper and then design it on a laptop?
Hmm. Um, yes, usually in school, you learn the first thing you have to do is figure out the material because you can imagine a beautiful material in your head. It might not exist. So you always want to find the material, and also that has to do with budget as well, right? Maybe you want a very expensive fabric for a very low budget project that just doesn't make sense. So I think looking for materials is first thing. And then once I have the material that fits the budget and the color that the client wants, then I go to the drawing board and start sketching. And usually I would recommend if anyone's interested in doing that, or if you're an illustrator, maybe you have this already. I find having an iPad and the app Procreate is extremely helpful. Um, Hand drawing, I think, as much as I love hand drawing on paper, it's hard to it's a bit of a hassle to turn it digitally and share it with clients. It's not clean, and if you make a mistake, you have to erase it. It's just so digitally working is very efficient as an illustrator for sure. Um, yeah, but I think when I personally work, when it comes to creative costume, I like to just work on the mannequin, just throw things on there and pin things together. I tend to work better that way instead of sitting there and sketching and trying to translate that into a design. I find that harder. But I do that for clients because there's certain steps involved for clients. So I do differently for my personal projects. I tend to throw things on a mannequin and work for my personal projects. And when it comes to client projects, I will always, to make sure we're on the same page, make a sketch. And I do sketches of illustration on different price tiers because a lot of times people are very scared to spend money on costumes. And I get it because if you think about it, what is the most money you've spent on a Halloween costume? Not much, a lot of times. So if people are spending like $1,000 on a costume, they're more cautious. So I will always give them, this is the most simple, or maybe more than like 1,000, then I will break down the steps, if you go with the sketch, it will be however much dollars and it involves these steps. So yeah, so Procreate is very good for that. Photoshop is essential. If you don't know how to use Photoshop, you have to learn. Um, Illustrator is another tool that can be very helpful for illustrators who are closer to graphic design field. If you're doing infographics, perhaps it really depends on the style. You can't do a very painting like drawing on Illustrator. I mean, you can, but it's very tricky and it's a lot of work. But a lot of oversized or print related products, you probably prefer to use Illustrator so that you can produce higher resolution images for clients. Platforms. I think I would say for illustrators, Instagram is a great tool. Even with TikTok and everything, Instagram probably is the best tool for illustrators. I am personally not great at it, so I can't give too much advice. But yeah, Instagram, and I'm trying out Behance. Is that how you pronounce it? Behance.
So.
Yeah, I think that works really well for commercial artists like photographers, graphic designers, but I don't know. I have some friends who have done children's illustration books and made portfolios on Behance and have had some success, but I think it's a hit or miss. So, but I think that's more of an international platform too when it comes to art. So that's one tool you could try. I think another one that it's on my list, I am trying is Etsy, actually. Depends on your field, but I'm trying Etsy. Maybe, it's usually known for crafty projects, but I saw a lot of children's book illustrators there on Etsy selling their service, even like legal services, legal document templates and things like that. So I think Etsy, I might try.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that list of top tools. When it comes to the community, you are really an active member of the Freelancer Forum community. What role does the community play for you personally or for your business? And for you personally, what's the benefit of your participation in the community?
So I thought I didn't know what it was when I was sent the link to the freelance forum. I was like, what is this? Because as I said, I'm not really good at figuring out all the tools available to me on Upwork or any other platform. Really, even though I'm kind of tech savvy, I'm just not good at utilizing those tools. And I always thought, man, it sucks to be a freelancer because I don't have coworkers. And even though I'm a little shy, I tend to love working with creative people. I work off of their energy. So I always wanted a community, but I never found that Upwork community. I was never really a part of it. So when you sent I received the invite to the first talk, I was like, oh, this is actually exactly what I need, because that's when I was starting to really speed up the process of utilizing Upwork and trying to get more clients and actively getting up in the morning and being on Upwork. So that timing really felt like, oh, I need this. So, I'm not sure if I'm necessarily there to get all these Upwork tips, which I'm always looking for, but sometimes I just don't have time to go on there and read all the threads. But I do try to go and read as much as possible when I have the time. But I think for me, it's more meaningful in that there are real people, real online people getting together and sharing their concerns or like their everyday life. I think just the sense of community, that I am not alone struggling, but I do, rather than success stories, I do love hearing people's struggles and how they figured it out, and I want to learn from that. So I think that's why I'm there. I'm not necessarily looking for ways to be, oh, I want to be successful on Upwork. Sure, anyone, right? But I'm there to kind of learn from other people's examples and hear their stories and, struggles.
Okay. Are there any threads that have caught your attention recently?
Actually, there were a few. I can't remember now, but let me think. I actually really love the threads that you do about the weekly wins. I think that's a great way to kind of, it it gives everyone time to think about, oh, what did I do? What do I plan to do this week? You know, it kind of organizes your list of priorities and realize maybe last week didn't suck so much, you know? Maybe it's okay because you see other people saying terrible things. Maybe like terrible things happen in their week. I'm doing fine, you know? So I think it's a good, like for me, that's a very good regular process of sharing and sense of community. So I like those kinds of threads, to be honest.
Kudos to Jessica who suggested setting up those weekly topics. So yeah, it's not on me, it's on Jessica. So thank you, Jessica.
I see someone in the chat and said, I think I also saw Pinterest just to add to the platform list of suggestions.
Oh
I think
yes,
someone said
I was
Pinterest.
asking.
Yeah, it was that's a great tool. I find it very helpful to collect images, inspiration, and references for sure. And oh, classic books.
Ravi is asking, have you considered classic books that are now in open domain, such as Adventures of Huckleberry Finn?
Great point. This was something someone told me when I was trying to prepare a children's book illustration portfolio for the first time. One of the suggestions they gave me was pick a classic book that's, you know, open domain and illustrate it as if you are, you know, illustrating for this classic book and it's getting published. Think about it like that and prepare a portfolio. So I do have a few on my list, like Huckleberry Finn, that I want to add to my portfolio. And that's another thing I've been doing on top of Upwork. When I have downtime, I try to draw one illustration maybe every few days just to add to my portfolio to kind of expand those
Right.
genre.
I'm not talking about a portfolio. I'm not talking about populating a portfolio.
Oh, you mean
I'm
to
saying
publish?
to publish it yourself. It's an open domain. And you don't have to publish the entire big story. You can abridge it, you can mold it, and you can,
That's a good idea.
once you've got one going, you can next go to Tom Sawyer, mix up the characters. That's what I was talking about.
Okay, Ravi, I think you're giving me some really great ideas. I might be doing that after this call. I'm gonna I love it. I love it. Thank you for the suggestion. It's a great idea for publishing.
Thanks, Ravi. And yeah, saying as you mentioned, you were looking for any input, and I think Ravi shared
I'm
a
getting
really
a lot
valuable
today.
one.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ravi. Just in addition to Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, I know also Ravi is a fan of the Famous Five. Not sure if you're familiar with the book series. So
I've heard of it, but I don't think I'm that familiar. I know what it is. Can you tell me a little more? Yeah.
well, it's a series about like five friends and their adventures throughout their kind of childhood as they progress and go away to school and like all the different adventures they're having. Wait, please correct me. Is it Emily Blythe? The
Enid Blyton.
Enid Blyton. Okay, sorry. Enid
And
Blyton.
that's only one of the series. She was a very prolific writer, and she had a whole bunch of series for children
wow.
of different ages, for very young children, then the next age, then the next group, then the next group. And
That's amazing.
they're really immensely popular all over the world. We grew up,
Go ahead, Ravi, sorry.
reading Enid Blyton. And that's where we learned the language properly for the first time.
Oh, wow. That's pretty impressive.
On Ravi's suggestion, I did buy Famous 7, but I'm waiting to complete like the Secret 7. Sorry, I think that's the next series, Ravi, right? That's after Famous 5.
I don't remember the sequence now. I'll have to check it and I'll let you know. It's been a long time.
I'll have to check these books out because I'm doing this work now, I borrow a lot of children's books from the library to take reference, you know, a lot of famous ones. And I didn't really know this one well, so I think I'll check these out.
The descriptions, the writer is really awesome. The descriptions are really vivid. So that's why I think it would be great, like Huckleberry Finn, like it would be really great to, and there's a lot of material for like great illustrations. But you'll be a judge of that, of course.
No, I see. I just Googled it. It's more like classical drink, which I love. So I definitely want to check it out and see all the illustrations inside. It looks pretty cool.
Well, we are at time. Actually, we are a little bit over time, and for me personally, time flew by
Me
in
too.
this conversation. I really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you, Noor and Ravi, for your contributions. So Sang, thank you for agreeing to sit down and talk about your experiences, about your business, about the community with us, and hope we'll catch you later in the Freelancer Forum.
I'll be there. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Everybody, see you in the Freelancer Forum. Have a great morning, have a great day, have a great evening, and have a great life.
Yep. Bye, everybody.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.